I just want to point out that we have students from the Center High School. They had to apply to be able to come, and they're all standing over here. So if you could, and I just wanted to point that out to all of you that they drove up. They came up last night. We had students here from the tiny town of Bethune. They got up at 5 this morning to come. We had students here from Kit Carson. We had graduate students. We had law students. So you can see that the scope of this expands across the state and across all grade levels. But I also want to turn it over to my colleague David Hinojosa, and if there's time, I'd like to give a moment to have Bruce Coy also talk about it, because if it weren't for the support of the organizations and the superintendents and administrators in the state, we would never have made it this far. So I'm going to turn it over to David first and then Bruce.
Sure. Once again, David Hinojosa with MALDEF. We entered this case because students were being denied a basic educational opportunity in Colorado. How can that be when the legislature is supposed to be doing its work for the state's most vulnerable children as well as all children? And when we have families like the Diaz family from Colorado who are being denied pre-K funding because all they can afford in Greeley is 2.5 hours of schooling for them, and that 2.5 hours of schooling is largely not doing much for those students, we had to do something about it. I think the court's questions from the bench today let us know that they are taking this issue very seriously. They had some really insightful questions, but I thought that perhaps one of the most strange answers from the state was when they could not define what a thorough and uniform education is. So their constitutional duty, and perhaps I should have said this up there in the argument, but if their constitutional duty is to provide a thorough and uniform education, but they don't even know what a thorough and uniform education is, how can the blind lead the blind? I mean, that was incredible to hear that from the state, especially when they have actual definitions of what a thorough and uniform education system is in their own statute. So obviously they're not reading what they're writing, and they're certainly not paying attention to it when it comes to the funding, because that funding system is so far skewed from what the opportunities that children need. We're not talking about the greatest opportunity, the type of quality of education that kids get, for example, at the best private schools. We're talking about just meaningful opportunities for them to achieve their potential, and so that they can help contribute to the future of Colorado. Because by the year 2040, the former U.S. Census Director predicted in the state of Colorado, his name's Steve Murdoch, in this case, he predicted that Colorado's student population will be a majority-minority population. Who is going to take care of many of you as you age and get older? Is it going to be an uneducated workforce, a workforce that isn't competitive and not prepared to do the work of tomorrow? Or is it going to be one that can compete tomorrow, not just within Colorado, outside of Colorado, and across the world? So I thank you very much. I'm more than happy to take any questions at this time, or I'll just turn it back over.
How broken is a system that has required 8 years of this fight to essentially get equal treatment to kids across the state?
It's quite insane that we have to go through this fighting, because there hasn't been any change on the school finance side. The only changes that have been is cutting cost of living expenses, cutting the budgets by millions of dollars. So we're not talking about a fractured system. We're definitely talking about a severe break in the system. They just want to look at the standards, they want to push the standards, push the rigor on the system, but they don't want to look at the opportunities that children need in the classrooms. And so without them looking at the other side, of course they're never going to get the job done.
Senator Mike Johnston has a rewrite of the School Finance Act that the legislature might pass this year, along with ballot issue to bring in maybe another $1 billion. How far would that go in achieving the goals that you?
Yeah, I have not analyzed that bill. I know that definitely the neediest students in Colorado include English language learners, special education, and at-risk youth. I know that there is not any real facilities funding where we have a $16 billion shortfall already, and classrooms matter on how students get educated. So I believe that what the senator, without even having to look at it, I'm sure it's a far cry of what children in Colorado need.
If I could add to that,
we're spending 45% on education already, on public education.
Well,
What do you say to that?
Yeah, and of course they're going to pay 45% of the state's budget on education because you got 800,000 plus students attending school 8 hours a day. It's an institution unlike any other state institution. That's not just in Colorado. That happens all across the country. You know, the educational system is the largest investment, you know, not only because it makes sense economically, but it makes sense in a practical sense because you have to pay teachers, you have to pay administrators, you have to have a transportation network, et cetera, et cetera. There's no other system in the state of Colorado.
If I might address the question on Senator Johnston again, if that's all right. Senator Johnston has been very clear in not wanting to do any analysis whatsoever of what the actual costs are. So from the start, without a costing out analysis or any analysis of what the costs are, we believe that it fails just to meet the threshold constitutional issue. And as my colleague, Mr. Hinojosa said, there's huge deficits in meeting the needs of all students, especially when you look at special education kids and the at-risk and the ELL funding. We have questions as to whether it's sustainable. We have questions as to what it looks like several years down the road. Not to demean the fact that $1 billion tax increase wouldn't be something that is well received and well needed in Colorado, but it needs to be part of an overall plan as to how we actually get to constitutional compliance, and that plan has so far been missing. Does that help answer your question? Okay.
Is it conceivable if that bill passes that can be used if you prevail as a response to the lawsuit? Did we fix the system?
I think if you listen to Senator Johnston, he does not advocate that his plan is anyway addressing adequacy or what is needed by Lobato. So I would say that the answer to that is probably no.